John Giles, very welcome back to the show.
Hello, Richie. Yeah.
Good. What have you made of this so far? It's been entertaining. I don't know if necessarily high quality is the word I'd use, but it's certainly been entertainment galore in this one.
Yeah, it was end to end, Richie. There's no doubt about that. Rashford got his goal again. It looked like Manchester United would win it at that stage, Richie.
Yeah.
And Barcelona have come back into it. Yeah, entertaining game. Definitely.
Has been certainly. It's kind of almost been a throwback as we see United play the ball off their own post and get it clear with 4 minutes to go. Free kick routine found its way towards the goal. That first goal from Marcos Alonso, when you think back, John, to 5 minutes into the second half, a nod down header from the former Chelsea full-back who was playing as a centre-half tonight. David De Gea scrambled to get onto his post to try and get something on it and looked to be as if he could have positioned himself better. I don't know if you would agree on that front.
Well, it was very near the post, and what happens, I think, with the goalkeepers, Richie, if they dive to get it, there's a good chance they'll catch their head on the post. It's always dangerous for them in that way. But there wasn't a lot of power in the header, but it was a good one just the same.
Yeah, he rose up above his marker at that stage to give Barcelona the lead. Then that leveller through Marcus Rashford, John, a fantastic run again from him. I think it's now 14 goals in 17 games or something like that at the moment. Like, literally, statistically, there is no player in better form across the whole of Europe than Marcus Rashford. It's a remarkable uptick in form from him over these past couple of months.
Yeah, he had a bad couple of years, Richie, but he's come back to his best, and he's still a very young fella. But he's got all the equipment. He's a big lad. He's very quick. Against Leeds last week, he started on the left wing, and that's definitely not his position. Yeah. They did put him back into the middle of it, and he made a big difference for them. He scored that, but that was against Leeds. But I think a couple of years ago he had a bad time, Richie. I think he was struggling a bit. But now he's back to his best, and he's got all the equipment, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's sometimes a case of all the kind of, I guess, factors aligning, whether it's mentality, whether it's right manager, whether it's application, all that kind of stuff, and maybe even just a bit of luck sprinkled on top as well. But he certainly managed to put everything together. It was interesting from that, because I was doing commentary for the United Leeds game on Sunday afternoon, and I thought the tactical thing for Manchester United was interesting in that, as you mentioned there, Marcus Rashford started over on the left-hand side, and as the game wore on, as Ten Hag made his substitutions, he pushed Luke Shaw further forward on the left, had Lisandro Martinez basically operating on the left-hand side, and that allowed what's become an old school thing, John, that certainly wouldn't have been in your day, and certainly wouldn't have been when I was growing up, of having two strikers up top in Marcus Rashford and Wout Weghorst. It's almost a surprise that more teams haven't gone back to the well with that one.
Yeah, but I'm surprised as well, Richie. What's happened a lot in the game, as we know, keeping possession is one of the main things now. And it's taken ages to get up to the front. Like you see Manchester City doing it a lot, playing it, and not getting it up. Like in the old days, you look. That's what you first look for. Could you get it up to somebody up the front? Nowadays, it's keeping possession, and I think it's gone out of the game a lot. And I think it's wrong. I think you've got to look forward as quickly as you possibly can, and get it up there in the right way.
Yeah,
that's Rashford. Rashford is a big, strong fella, as we know, and the first thing I was told when I was a kid playing at Manchester United, Jimmy Murphy was a great coach. When you get on the ball in the middle field, the first thing you look for, can you put somebody through? And what I find in the game now, Richie, it's the last thing midfield players are looking for.
Yeah.
Play to the full back, get it back in. And in the meantime, even Haaland suffers with it at Manchester City. I think he makes a lot of runs. The ball's not delivered, and he's out of the game. But Rashford is made for that early ball through, because he has the pace, and he's a big, strong fella. He can get on the ball, Richie, and he is really coming to his best now. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and Manchester United's up around the top 3 in the Premier League now. That result briefly put them above Manchester City in the Premier League the other day. So, like, it shows when you have a player like that in form, the effect that it can have on the side around you. I want to touch on Leeds before we move on to last night's game, John. They're clearly in a very difficult position. They're hovering just above the drop zone in the Premier League after that defeat. Since sacking Jesse Marsh, they had, to my knowledge, 3 different candidates become unavailable in different ways, shapes or forms. So that was Carlos Corberán, the West Brom manager, signed a new contract there. They clearly wanted to lock him down because he was hot property. Andoni Iraola, was the guy at Rayo Vallecano who Leeds had been scouting for a while. They said no, and Arne Slot was a contender who was in charge of Feyenoord, and they said no. So I don't know if you saw this evening, John, and I want to get your instant reaction on this if possible. It's become such a desperate state now in terms of Leeds trying to get a manager. Harry Redknapp has put his name forward for the Leeds gig.
Has he?
He has.
Yeah. Well, I'd be surprised at that. I mean, Harry's been out of the game a long time. But why not? You know, if he wants to do it, like Leeds have been turned down, as you said there, Richie, by 2 or 3 managers, because obviously because of the position they're in. But Harry's been out of the game a long time.
7 years, I think now.
It's usually, from my experience of it anyway, it doesn't usually work. Getting somebody in that hasn't been in there for a long time, Richie.
I think what that situation does, I wouldn't regard him as a serious candidate to be honest, John. When you consider that, I think he's clearly put that out there himself that he has applied and made contact and let it be known that he's available. I think it's serving to underline perhaps the folly in Leeds not having a definite candidate to go to, knowing that they were sacking Jesse Marsh. I think that's probably the point that this underlines. Yeah.
Well, from what I saw, they seem to have 2 or 3 names lined up. And I can't remember who they were, but the first one seemed to be on his way, and then just changed his mind. And they need a manager as quickly as they possibly can, because we know the position they're in. But I'd be surprised at Harry coming back into the game at this stage in his life, to be honest.
Yeah, it'd be a bit of a shock. On Jesse Marsh, he's had an interesting week as well, because obviously he'd found himself suddenly out of work from Leeds. It looked as if, I think, and Cahill mentioned this on the news round a few minutes ago, that, you know, the other day it was almost fait accompli that Jesse Marsh was going to get the Southampton job, and then it turns out that those talks were off. He was seemingly only offered a 6-month contract by Southampton, and he has said no, which is, I don't know what you make of that. He clearly had an offer to get back in the job get into a job straight away, and had decided to walk away from the offer that Southampton had put in front of him.
Well, I think the offer wasn't very much or very good, Richie, to be honest. I think what they're saying was, if you keep us up, then we'll extend the contract. So what they're saying was, if you don't keep us up, you're gone. But that's no way to do it. I don't blame him for walking away from that. What they want is a miracle for him to get an extension on his contract. No, that's not the way to do it. I mean, if they're really serious, in my opinion, what they should do is get a manager and appoint him now for at least 12, 18 months. In other words, this season and the rest of next season. So you can't. I think it's outrageous to do what they've done with Marsh, to say come down, because I think he was under the impression he was going to get a contract at least until next season. But what they're saying is, now they're in a very, very difficult position, as we know, Southampton. But to say to somebody coming in, okay, we'll take you on, but it's only for 6 months. In other words, if you keep us up, we'll keep you on.
Yeah, and
that's no offer. I mean, I don't blame him for turning that down.
Yeah, it's a horrible position for him to be in when you consider, like, technically he could be out of work twice in 6 months, which is, you know, we talk about managers losing jobs and all that as if it's almost fun and games. It's not. Like, it's people, it's like incomes, it's all that regular stuff that kind of we take for granted almost to a degree in terms of the world of football. I want to get on to last night's game as well, John. Full-time whistle, by the way, has just gone at the Camp Nou. Barcelona 2, Manchester United 2. We'll get on to last night's game, John. A 3-1 victory for Manchester City to go back on top of the Premier League. The first time they've done that since November the 5th. Those second half goals really doing it for them, from Jack Grealish and then from Erling Haaland to make it 3-1. A real statement victory, I guess you'd say, for Manchester City last night. It's not going to be decisive in the title run-in by any means, but certainly lets Arsenal know they're really in a race now.
Well, they certainly are. I mean, they won well in the finish in the match, Richie, as we know, because he made a couple of changes at half time, and what was like, Pep was inclined to make dramatic changes, Richie, in my opinion, like especially in the left back position. You know, he wants the left back to play as a left back at times and play in the midfield position. You know, now he had Bernardo Silva doing it last night, but the point is, Richie, you can't play two positions in a match. You know, it's hard enough to play one position in a match. And what was the name of the lad that went away?
João Cancelo went off to Bayern Munich there.
Yeah, well, they fell out with him. That's what he was doing. But he actually had a young lad in it lastly, Rico Lewis.
Yeah.
He's a midfield player, and in the Tottenham match, he had him doing it. So, like, last week, even in the match against Spurs, Harry scored, as we know.
Yeah.
But that lad got a ball, received the ball on the edge of the box. It was a bad ball. He lost control of it, and actually went into a position where a normal left back would be. Now, you can't play two positions at the one time. Now, he said that himself, I think, more or less after the match. Pep did. He didn't have the midfield player, Bernardo Silva, in that position in the second half. I think he's inclined to do things like that. But he said after the match that he more or less said, I made a mistake in that. You know, you can't have somebody like Bernardo Silva. Then he expects him to do a midfield job. Then to be in the left-back position. You know, like playing in the left-back position, you have to stay there in relation to where the ball is or the opposition is, Richie. You know, it's just madness. And I think he more or less said that after the match.
He did, yeah. He basically admitted that he got his tactics wrong in that first half.
But he's been doing that for a while.
This goes back to...
I mean, he had that young kid last week, young Lewis, in that position for a couple of matches. Cancelo was in there for a few... It's just looking at a game and saying, well, look, I'll try this. Nobody else has done this before. I'm going to do it now. It doesn't work like that in football.
It's almost as if
obviously you can make changes, you can positional changes, Richie, but you can't have a left back expected to play in midfield and also play at left back, because if you go into the middle of the field, which he has been doing with the left back, and the opposition get the ball, it cannot be in the left back position as it should be if he's already in the middle of the field.
It's almost as if Guardiola, and I don't think anybody would ever dispute whether or not the qualities of Pep Guardiola as a manager and somebody who's able to build a team and to win trophies and all that stuff. It seems as if he just wants to also prove how smart he is at times as well, which is... Yeah,
I think it happens. It can happen. I've done very well doing that. Now I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
Nobody else has done it before, so I'm going to try and do this. You know, and football, in my opinion, Richie, it's a very, very complicated game. So you have to, what the great managers do, in my opinion, is simplify the game as much as they possibly can. You know, what Pep is doing is making it more difficult, in my opinion, to do it. In other words, we're a good team, we're doing that and that. And it does happen to managers where they say, well, yeah, done great, now I'm going to try this particular situation. And you finish up just making a mess of it.
You turn yourself in knots at times.
Exactly.
They've gone...
Football is a very complicated game, Richie, in my opinion. People say it's a simple game. A lot of people... I don't think it is. And to do the things that you want to do, keep it simple. You know, but I think it does happen, I think, with some managers. They're very successful, like Pep is, and say, okay, now I'm going to try that. I'm going to get a midfield player, play him at left back when he's in the left back position, but he's not going to be a left back really. You know, it's just madness, in my opinion. Now, he did more or less say that after the match. You know, he didn't have Silva in the second half. He had him playing as a midfield.
He had him back playing in midfield, brought on Manuel Akanji, switched Nathan Ake to left back, which is something they've done recently, and kind of worked in their favour.
When you're defending. You can't be if you're playing midfield and left back. You can't play two positions at one time.
Yeah. I want to touch on the Merseyside derby as well, which obviously happened, seems like weeks ago now at this stage, but it was only on Monday night. Liverpool winning by 2-0, the first Premier League win of the calendar year, which seems remarkable. But it was a real eye-opener, I guess, for Sean Dyche to show where Everton actually are after that buoyancy that they would have gotten from the win over Arsenal the week prior. This is this is where you actually are, and this is what you actually have to deal with between now and the end of the season for Sean Dyche.
Oh yeah, it was an eye opener for him, Richie, if he needed one, because he's a big job on his hands, as we know. But I thought they were poor, really poor against Liverpool the other day. Liverpool played well; they took the goals well, but from Everton's point of view, I thought it was a poor performance. And he's a lot to do, and he'll get to know the players obviously better as time goes on. But looking at them against Liverpool the other night. He's a lot to do.
And that's, I guess, the frustrating thing for him, is that he got such a tune out of them against Arsenal, and that was one of those performances from minute 1 to the 90th where everybody seemed up for it, and players who had shied away from performing under Frank Lampard and other managers looked like they were reborn. And then for them to completely regress again in the Merseyside derby of all games, it's a massive concern and shows the job that he has to do. And it's not just going to be, as you mentioned, with Jesse Marsh and Southampton, it wouldn't just be like a 6-month gig. This is something that they need to have faith in him for the long haul. He needs to plug away and build this squad in his image and have a bit more fight in them than they showed the other night.
Definitely, and they don't seem to have the resources to get players in, Richie. They don't have the money now. That's what it looks like to me. So what he has is what he's got to put up with now. And against Liverpool, the previous week was very good, as you say. They were played at home against Arsenal and played well with plenty of spirit. But I think the spirit wasn't bad, but it was the actual play and the lack of real quality that he has to work with.
On the Liverpool side of things, I'm loath to judge form basically on one game, because Liverpool up until Monday night, in the league terms anyway, had been pretty poor. They've got a huge game on the horizon next week with Real Madrid, and almost equally as big is that game against Newcastle, because with them, they do have a game in hand, Liverpool on the top 4, get back to level pegging in games, then they're only, I think, 6 off the top 4. Is Champions League football a realistic ambition for Liverpool between now and the end of the season?
No, it's realistic, but difficult, Richie, because the consistency or lack of consistency has been dreadful for Liverpool this year, this season. As you said, they played well and deserved to win the other night, but they've done that a couple of times and then lose to teams that you'd never believe they were going to lose to. I mean, it's only a couple of matches ago that he said it was the worst performance as a manager that he's ever had. So it was good to get back on winning terms against Everton, but we have to wait and see now. Is that the way it's going to be, or are they going to go back to ways that some matches, beaten by teams that should be nowhere near them? So we'll have to wait another few weeks to see if the Liverpool are back to where they should be, or is there something there that we don't know about that's given them such a bad season that they've had so far.
I think crucially for them as well, they had Virgil van Dijk on the bench the other night, back to fitness, Roberto Firmino back to fitness, Diogo Jota back to fitness, pictures today of Luis Diaz back in training as well. Having players come back in of that kind of calibre can only help them out. Just to finish off, obviously a 2-2 draw now for Barcelona and Manchester United in this Europa League fixture. Obviously they will be disappointed to let the win slip, John, but coming away from the Camp Nou with a draw, albeit there's no away goals involved now, this is a decent enough result for Manchester United.
Well, we'll know by the second leg, Richie. Sure, if they win at Old Trafford, everything is good. And when you look back and say, well, we could have done better away from home. But before the match, you'd probably take the result. Richie, draw away from home is always good. A home draw. You've scored 2 goals away from home. It remains to be seen. But obviously, getting the win 2-0 would be better for everybody.
Of course.
But not a bad result, really, overall.
All right, John, an absolute pleasure, as always, in all our football here and Off the Ball, brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. John, we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, thanks, Richie.